All right, we're gonna be working with lumbar flexibility, opening the lumbar spine to create space for the sciatic nerve. Come onto your back, and first we'll just extend the legs, stretch the legs out. One hand on the belly, one hand on the chest. Find your breath, and just relax here. Big breaths into the belly, through the nose, in and out. Lengthen the inhales, lengthen the exhales. Making the breath as long as possible, as deep as possible. Inhaling fully, exhaling fully. From here, just bring the toes, heels, knees together so that the legs are zipped together. And we're gonna work with tucking the tailbone and tilting the tailbone. In this case, tucking the tailbone means pressing the lower back to the floor and trying to lift the tailbone up towards the ceiling. That would be tucking in this position. Tilting would be pressing the tailbone down, trying to get the tip of the tailbone to touch the ground and creating a little arch here. And you can check with your hand. Ideally, you'll be able to get your whole hand underneath your low back on the inhale, on the arch. Exhale, round the back, lift the tailbone up. This will be a contraction, a flexion of the hip flexors. Inhale, that's contraction or flexion of the lumbar extensors. And we're gonna continue to go like that, tucking on the exhale, squeezing hip flexors if you want a little abdominals, but make sure you're tucking from the bottom. If you feel the abdominals, should be the base of them. Inhale. Don't worry about lifting the mid back. We're just working on those lower section of the lower back of the lumbar spine, where the sciatic nerve originates from. And as you're doing this, think about trying to get some length on your spine. Maybe you can walk your shoulders and your head a little farther away from your hips and try to get that breath to be long and expansive so you get a sense of your ribs moving away from your hips, all 360 degrees around. On the inhales and on the exhales, tuck the tailbone. 2 more like that. How about 1 more here? Now we're gonna bend the knees. Keep the big toes touching, but separate the heels and keep the knees touching the whole time. We're gonna keep the hips on the ground, same thing, same breath, same movement. Inhale, create a nice arch. Feel the low back extensors contracting. Feel a little stretch on the hip flexors and abdominals. And then exhale, not only squeezing the abs to push the low back, but also trying to lift the tailbone. It's almost like you're lifting the tailbone and then the hips, except for this one, we're keeping the hips on the ground, but the tailbone is trying to pull the hips up. Inhale, now the tailbone is pointing down. You can think of it as like the tip of my finger here. It's showing in. On the exhale, I'm trying to get the tip of my tailbone, my pelvis, tucking. Sending it down, back. Sending it forward and up. Inhale, arching the low back. Exhale, rounding. How about 2 more like that? Keep searching for that maximum range of motion, maximum contraction and extension. Okay. Now, the next time, we're going to inhale to arch, and then let's try this. Exhale to round, tack the tailbone, and like I said before, lifting the tailbone, rounding so much that eventually your hips come off the ground. You can go as high as you want. You don't have to be perfectly straight. That would be like probably the max right there. If you want to be lagging a little bit, that's okay too. Even if you were just an inch or two off the ground, that's okay too. And if holding this position is too much, you can always warm up to it by inhaling and lifting the hips up, exhaling, rounding the spine down to touch. Again, we're gonna have the toes together, the knees together, and you can just lift the hips up, find that low back extension. Okay, so from here, let's try the tucking and tilting. Inhale, we're gonna arch. Now a little more gentle here, more mindful because the hips now are lifted. Exhale, tuck. The movement is gonna be smaller, less noticeable because we have more stability. So mobility will be challenged. So here we're just working with the same exact muscles though. Tucking on the exhale, arching on the inhale. Keep the knees together. Two more. To come down, we're going to inhale, arch. Exhale from the top of the spine down towards the low back until the low back and sacrum touch. And then just stretch the legs out, shake that off. And we're gonna switch face down. So just turn onto your belly. And to start here, we're simply going to bring the belly, chest on the floor, forehead on the ground, knees together, toes together, heels apart. We'll start with the knee bend. Super easy here, just bending the knee towards 90 degrees. And slowly bringing the toes down almost to touch. Barely hovering. Ideally, don't rest them on the floor, just barely hovering the floor, and then again. Now, we only want to bend towards 90 degrees. Don't try to go all the way for the glutes with the heels. Just keep it about 90 degrees. Focus more on flexing the ankle instead of pointing the toes out. Try to flex the ankle. Now, if you want to keep your head off the ground a little bit, you can do so with the chin in. But don't turn your head to the side. Either forehead on the ground or a forehead off the ground with the chin in. Not looking forward either. And we're just flossing the hamstrings here. Two more. Okay, release that for a second if you want to turn your head to the side for a moment. Okay, a couple options here. You can do the next movement just like we did here, but with the legs out, tucking the tailbone and arching, tucking and tilting back. Or you could come to your elbows. Now, if you're going to be here, you have to retract the shoulders. You have to lengthen the back of the neck and avoid trying to come too hard into the extension. This will turn into hyperextension. So if you want to have a little bit of support, you could even come into this position here with the hand serving as a pillow for the forehead. We're tucking the tailbone,
You can squeeze the glutes here if you want, and tilting it, lifting it up, tucking, and tilting. Same breathing pattern. Exhale into tuck. Now we're pressing the tailbone down towards the ground. Inhale into arch. Two more. Now when you're ready, we're gonna do a back extension. This one is gonna serve us as a reminder of how to engage our posterior chain. So the big toes come together, the ankle flexes, the toes are barely off the ground. We start with the forehead on the ground, then we lift it off the ground, and we lift the elbows, hands, wrist, and we're just working here, breathing. If you need to tuck the tailbone here because you feel too much hyperextension, don't try to go so high, instead just tuck a little bit. Breathe. Feel the engagement of the back body. We're squeezing the knees, squeezing the toes. The hamstrings are engaged. The glutes are gently engaged. Low back extensors strongly engaged. One more breath here. Exhale. We're gonna slowly make our way to child pose. Any way that feels naturally for you to bring yourself back. Toes together, knees apart, forehead on the ground, and now we're gonna just counter pose here. Breathe and soften. Walk your hands to the right side slowly. Give a little stretch onto the low back on the left side. You can again use your hands as pillows here for your forehead. Try to soften into this position. Keep the hips heavy. Come back to center slowly. And we're gonna go now to the left side. Again, you can set your hands like a pillow. Breathe here. Breathe into the low back, especially into the right side. Gently stretching on the inhale, softening in the exhales. Two more breaths here. Slowly come back to center. Give it a couple breaths here to reset the spine. And when you're ready, we're gonna come up slowly, all the way up to standing. And we're gonna do some hinges here. We're actually holding a hinge, working with the tucking and tilting of the pelvis. So standing up tall with the feet hip width or a little wider apart, toes in, heels out. Find your length. Hinge the hips back just a little bit, enough that you feel your hamstrings, your glutes, your low back, and then from this position, tuck the tailbone slowly. and tilt it up towards the sky. So depending on your case, you might have chronic hyperextension, too much arch, or you might have chronic kyphosis, too much rounding. So if this is where you usually are at, you really want to focus more on this part of the exercise, really lifting that tailbone up. If you're in hyperextension, the trick here is to try to tuck but keep the hips back. Inhale as you bring the tailbone up. Feel that as you bring the tailbone up, that stretches on the hamstrings. Exhale, bring the tailbone down. 2 more. Last one here. And stand up. And just take a moment here to find a lot of length around your waistband. We'll take a few big breaths here just to reset. So whenever you take an inhale now, just focusing on expanding the ribs up, away from the hips. On the exhale, try to keep that length. If you want to keep a little bit of a hinge there so you feel your low back extensors, especially those lower low back extensors firing. Ideally, you bring your hand here. You would not feel any bones, just a nice valley between two lines of paraspinal muscles. And from there, you go on with your day.